Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. It is Wednesday, which means it is the day where I answer your questions. It is the Ask Me Anything episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I've got two questions this week. The first one comes from someone who sent an email, as you can do, an email to ama@fppradio.com. And the question is, with police departments across the country totally out of control, if you were elected president, what will you do to correct the situation? And I've talked about some of these out-of-control police departments, some of the things to where police officers do horrible things and then wind up never being held accountable. There was a story that happened a couple of years ago where there was a 7-year-old girl who was killed during a drug raid, a no-knock raid. She was sleeping on the couch, heard people bust in. She sat up, and she was gunned down by police. And, well, it came out earlier this week that the police officer that killed this 7-year-old girl will not face charges. Now, initially, I believe he was facing charges, and then whatever it was happened earlier this week. I believe charges were dropped. And so now, it's basically been decreed and determined that police can kill people with, no repercussions at all as long as they are in the performance of their duties. And what would I do if I were elected president? What would I do to control this? Well, I think that at some point the police departments have to have federal lawsuits brought against them. And as far as I know, very few local police departments have ever had federal lawsuits brought against them. Very few police have ever had federal charges brought against them. We talked a good bit in late last year about the Darren Wilson situation in Ferguson, Missouri, where Darren Wilson killed Michael Brown, and there was the grand jury that wound up not indicting. And there was the article that I read where it said that it's easier to indict a ham sandwich than a police officer because a grand jury will do basically whatever the prosecutor wants, and the prosecutor doesn't want to indict police officers because the prosecutor has to work alongside the police officers. So why would the prosecutor cross the thin blue line? It makes absolutely no sense for them to do so from a professional standpoint. So you do need to have these outside entities. And I hate even saying that the federal government should get involved in something because I don't think that the federal government should even exist. But when you have prosecutors who fail to do their jobs in bringing about just even the grand jury, it's not a conviction to where the person would go to jail. It is bringing about an indictment to where it goes to an actual trial. So you have prosecutors failing to do their jobs at the grand jury level, so you need to have something happen. And, if I were elected president, I could not say, all police departments abolished. That's not within the power of the presidency. But the president could use the Department of Justice to bring about federal charges for police officers that violate either their oath of office or that violate the rights of someone, and while the police officer is in performance of his or her duties. The next question, and this was not actually submitted through the AMA process of either sending the email to ama@fppradio.com or tweeting or sending me a message directly. This was a question that was asked in a Facebook group that I'm a member of, and I was tagged in the post, and the question was asked of me and several other people. And the question involves the Free State Project. The question is, do you see the FSP as fizzling out or building steam? And then there is another comment or two, and then he says, I'm trying to figure out if movers are coming in trickles compared to years ago or at a much greater rate. And so I took some time. I did some research. I wanted to actually give an informed answer instead of just what I thought was the answer. And while doing so, I came across an article from the Free State Project that says 1/3 of New Hampshire new residents are moving here due to the FSP. And let me just share this with you real quick, and then I want to show you or tell you what the FSP official numbers say. The piece here from Mike Vine, who writes, 1/3 of New Hampshire new residents due to FSP. Mass Migration Project, now the largest constituency of new movers to small northeastern state. The Free State Project announced that it is now responsible for nearly 40% of New Hampshire's net in-migration from other U.S. states. As reported Saturday in the New Hampshire Union Leader, based on the latest Census Bureau data, New Hampshire has seen a rebound of migration from other U.S. states to approximately 1,117 people from July 1st, 2013 to July 1st, 2014. During that same period, the Free State Project confirmed that 405 of its participants had officially made the move to New Hampshire. In short, the Free State Project is responsible for over 1/3 of interstate migration into New Hampshire over the Census Bureau's reporting period. And then the article goes on to talk about the Free State Project a little bit. And then there's a quote from Free State Project President Carla Garrick, who says, quote, FSP movers have already purchased approximately $30 to $40 million in New Hampshire real estate. They come from every walk of life, including entrepreneurs, nurses, engineers, lawyers, teachers, small business owners, farmers, and more. Both established families and fresh college graduates are choosing New Hampshire as our home over any other state or country. And now let me actually go over some of the FSP numbers that I downloaded this morning from the Free State Project website, freestateproject.org. So I downloaded the numbers in a CSV, which is a comma space value searchable database spreadsheet sort of thing. And so I broke these numbers down by year, number of people that are friends of the Free State Project, signers, meaning FSP participants saying that, I intend to move to New Hampshire, in-state friends, and then people with no designation. I'll go over these when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's FANS.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So I'll get back to answering the question about whether or not the FSP is gaining momentum, losing momentum, or just chugging along like the little engine that could. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They also take Bitcoin for precious metals purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 850-478-5270 or online at rrbi.co. So the question was, do I see the FSP, Free State Project, as fizzling out or building steam? And a second part of this question is, are movers coming in trickles compared to years ago or at a much greater rate? And the Free State Project put out a piece earlier today, I believe it was, earlier today, that makes the claim that approximately 40% of new movers to New Hampshire moved because of the Free State Project. The piece written by Mike Vine, who is listed as the media liaison for the Free State Project, says that 405 FSP participants made the move between July 1st, 2013 and July 1st, 2014. However, data that I downloaded from the Free State Project's website shows that in 2013, 147 people moved. In 2014, 67 people moved, for a grand total of 214 people during the entirety of 2013 and 2014. And that is well under half of the number that is being reported of 405 people. Well, no, 214 is just over half of the number that was reported, 405 people between July 1st, 2013 and July 1st, 2014. But to answer the question that was asked of whether or not the Free State Project is picking up steam or fizzling out, if you will, the numbers actually show that people move in sort of waves. So in 2001, which is when the Free State Project was formed, the idea of the Free State Project was formed, there were 203 people total that signed on to the Free State Project. 101 of those were signers saying, I intend to move within 5 years of the Free State Project meeting its goal. One person signed on as a friend of the FSP, saying, I like the idea, but I'm not going to move. One person signed on as an in-state friend of the FSP, meaning someone that is in New Hampshire. And that one person, there's different things. There's in-state friend and out-of-state friend. And then there were people that signed and did not mark anything. And this is what I find most interesting, is that 26,035 people have signed either a form or the web form online for the Free State Project, but did not check any of the boxes. So they did not check whether or not they were an in-state friend, they did not check whether they were an out-of-state friend, and they did not check whether or not they intended to make the move within 5 years of the Free State Project hitting 20,000 people saying that they will make the move. So the number of signers, it peaked out in 2003. And 2003 is the year that there was the vote on what state would wind up being the destination for the Free State Project. And after that, in 2004, there were about 1,000 signers. In 2005, it dropped down to below 600, hovered around the 600 mark for a couple of years. And then in 2008, it jumped up to just over 800 signers. In 2009, it jumped up over 900. And then it's been over 1,000 signers per year since 2010. Since 2010, the high water mark was 1,673 signers in 2013. And let's look at the movers, because the mover number is really the number that was being asked about. In 2002 and 2003, there were 364 people that moved in those 2 years. And then in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, the number dropped off a little bit. 2008, 2009, there were 230 people that moved in those 2 years. 2010 dropped down a little bit. 2011 through 2013, there were 382 people that moved in those 3 years. 2014 was down to 67 movers, and then we're barely into 2015. So it appears as though there's waves of movers. So the first wave was 2002, 2003. And then the waters sort of receded a little bit. You know, still some coming in, but for the most part, nowhere near as many. And then the tide sort of came in again in 2008, 2009. And then the next lull, it was a very short lull, 2010, dropped below 100. And then since 2011, there was 2011, 2012, 2013, with over 100 movers each. 2014 had 67 movers, so it appears that, you know, it's sort of that low tide sort of area again. And then, and this is me speculating, but based on the numbers of signers and the number of movers, it is my speculation that by 2017, late 2016, possibly early 2017, the Free State Project will hit the goal of 20,000 signers. And that's me being very optimistic here. And then you're going to see more movers come in. But I realistically do not expect to have anywhere near all 20,000 people wind up moving. And is that just me being a negative Nancy, or is that me basing this off of something? Well, it's a combination of me being a realist and basing it off of current numbers. So, to date, only about 4% of people that have signed that live in the United States have actually moved. And I want to break those numbers down just a little bit. Where are people moving from? That might actually surprise you. And I'll tell you when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. ExpressCoin is the best choice for buying Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and more. ExpressCoin prides themselves on their customer service, so much so that the back end on the website should allow them to be even more focused on your needs. Get your cryptocurrencies with money order, check, wire transfer, or cash deposit. Get started at expresscoin.fppradio.com. That's expresscoin.fppradio.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for t-shirts, precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. There's an Amazon shopping iframe built into the website, or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. That's shop.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So, where are people moving from when they move to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project? And where are the signers coming from? And those are not the same places necessarily. So the movers, based on the data that I downloaded this morning from the Free State Project website, there have been 100 movers from Massachusetts. And Massachusetts, based on the data that's available from the Free State Project website, and I say based on what's available because there are people that have signed, there are people that have moved that did not specify what state they were living in. Some people did not specify a country. So this is based solely on the people that provided a state within the U.S. So I'm not calculating how many people moved from Great Britain, how many people moved from New Zealand. I certainly could, but I was just curious, mainly from within the United States, where are people moving from? And which state has the most signers? So Massachusetts ranks number 2 in signers, number 1 in movers. They had over 1,100 signers, 100 movers, which works out to just over, or rather just under 9% of signers from Massachusetts have actually moved to New Hampshire. Meaning, these are people, they don't necessarily have a long way to travel because Massachusetts borders New Hampshire. New York comes in number 2 for movers, number 3 for signers. California is number 1 for signers and number 3 for movers. 52 people have moved officially from California to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. California, not exactly a cold weather state. So one of the objections that you hear all the time is, well, I would move to New Hampshire, but it's too cold up there. Well, California has the 3rd most movers. Florida has the 4th most movers. 31 people have officially moved from Florida to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. There have been 951 signers from Florida. And then you have Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Jersey as the next highest as far as mover numbers go. Then Virginia and Texas. Again, places that are not exactly cold weather climates. Yes, I realize that there are mountains in Virginia, that those mountains do get snow occasionally, but it's definitely not a similar climate. New York, Connecticut, very similar climate. Massachusetts has a very similar climate to New Hampshire. So just looking at the locations here, you do have people that are coming from cold weather climates because they do want to have the extra freedoms and work with other libertarians to gain even more freedoms. And I talked a little bit on Monday about that survey, if you want to even call it that was put out by the John Locke Institute that claims that Florida is the freest state in the country, but yet they only used four categories, four criteria. The Mercatus Center, which uses over 200, lists North Dakota based on information from last year as the freest state. And, of course, the Mercatus Center puts their numbers out annually, so there's always going to be some fluctuation. And in all of those, New Hampshire is definitely up there. I forget if it was top 5 in both, but I do recall that it was top 5 in the Mercatus Center and has previously been ranked number 1 by the Mercatus Center. And yes, I realize that not every freedom that you would want exists in New Hampshire. And by that, I am referring to some of the gun freedoms, some of the cannabis freedoms. There's certainly not the freedom from the federal government. That still exists here in New Hampshire. But hopefully, at some point during my lifetime, New Hampshire will be able to be divorced from the federal government. I am being optimistic about that, and I hope that it happens, but at the same time, I'm being realistic, and I'm not going to hold my breath and wait. And there are people that will complain about some of the things in New Hampshire. Well, the commies next door, and by commies next door, they mean people in Vermont. The commies next door get, free, the gun freedoms, and they have better cannabis laws where it's been decrimmed there. It might wind up getting legalized there. They actually have implemented their medical marijuana, and they've got better ballot access. And I agree, there are things that definitely need to be changed in New Hampshire, but that could actually happen when you have other libertarians that are living together working towards making things better. And I completely understand, it's nice not having to move. I hate moving. And it's nice to expect other people to come where you are. And it's nice to think that, maybe I can change things where I am. But at the same time, it's lonely having that one-man protest. And I know because I have had many of them. I have had many a one-man protest. There was, back in 07, 08, I did one-man tax protest at the post office in Alabama. Even though there are other libertarians in Alabama, I just could not get them to come out. It's hard getting libertarians to come out to do things because most libertarians don't want to be followers, they want to be leaders. And I say leader in that sort of loose term, not that they want to control other people, but they it's like herding cats. Every cat wants to be the alpha, and it's hard to get them to sort of work together on things that are not necessarily their idea. It's difficult. Even in New Hampshire, where you do have 1,700 people that have moved, 1,400 have moved. There were a couple hundred that were already here by the time of the vote for the Free State Project destination state. So you've got, about 1,700 people that are here for the ideas of liberty that say that they are going to exert the fullest practical effort, but it's hard getting them to come out to do things because people disagree about what is the fullest practical effort. Whether, it be practical to talk to the lobby or the legislature, or whether it be practical to have a protest, or just, live off the grid and not interact with people. What is practical? maybe I'll discuss it on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on another day.